Welcome back to the Edges of Facilitation. This is a series where we're exploring what facilitation is and isn't by comparing it with related practices. Some of which overlap, some of which get mistaken for facilitation, and all of which have something to teach us. The idea is to help facilitators work out where their edges are and where they can achieve different results by working in different modes, and also where we need to set clear expectations, which is probably going to be an important topic for today. Today's guest is Pamela Lupton-Bowers, and our topic is facilitation versus team coaching. Welcome, Pamela.
Hi, Lucy. It's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Wonderful. Okay, so Pamela, we've known each other for a little while, but maybe you can just tell our lovely listeners a little bit about who you are and how you're connected to the topic of team coaching.
Okay. I started life as a sports coach, and I say that because that training and that practice and experience influences how I work with teams today. I've been a teacher, a professor, a corporate trainer in IT in the car manufacturing industry in Detroit, 10 years in the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, where I worked with teams right across the world in post-conflict and disaster situations. Since for the past 20 years, I've continued that, but as an independent. So I work with UN agencies and IOs in international organizations right across the board. And I work with teams at all levels. So whether they are disaster response, emergencies, whether they're risk assessment, whether they're development teams, and up to executive teams where I'm doing strategic formulation, planning, review. So teams has been my world since starting my professional life. And the reason I'm into team coaching is I was asked a couple of years ago by one of my clients to coach a team. So I went along and talked with her about how I might approach that and what I do and what my approach is. And it clearly didn't click with her. She had an idea in her head about what team coaching was and what she was expecting me to do. So I left a bit frustrated. I didn't get the gig. And I wondered, so what is it that she thinks it's different from what I think I am doing? And so I signed up for the Global Institute of Team Coaching. And I did a practitioner's course the first year, and I did a certification course the second year. And it helped frame for me when you're doing coaching, and the two, as you said, interlink and overlap. But I think you in your own head have to be clear about where that happens. And the insight, if I'm going into, what is it? This is our next question there. The insight for me early on in that training was a continuum that they put up on the screen. And the continuum I'm sure we're familiar with most of it. It starts with team facilitation. And we've all been asked to do that. Come and do it's usually a fun day. It's sometimes a perk, it's usually around an activity. Thousands of people around the world have built Lego bridges with me. And I've even done in-tree activities with some people. But it's about internal process. Let's build a team charter. How do we work together? That's number one. Sometimes at the same time, even the same gig, you're asked to work on substance, the task. So we want to do our team charter, and we want to look at our priorities for the year and plan those. So that's another kind of, which we've all done, and they ease into each other. Sometimes you're doing sort of a leadership approach to team coaching where you're saying, how does this team fit and how does it serve others and how does it relate to others and what's its immediate connection and stuff. And so you're asking, okay, what do you serve to others? And I call it, just for quickness, a give and get. What do we give to people and what do we expect to get from people? But it's still very focused on the team. Then you go to the level of sort of transformational leadership coaching. And I think examples of this might be, and you might have been asked to do this as well, where you work for like a division or a department and there are multiple teams within it. Mm-hmm. It could be the administrative department and you've got finance and IT and procurement and HR and, all these lovely people. And you're looking at how do they relate to each other, or how do we get them out of their silos? Where are the synergies? Where are the overlaps? Where are the gaps? How do we provide a more joined up service to the ultimate clients outside? And so you're looking at, how do you do that and how do you lead through that? Now, team coaching is all of that and. And the and is looking not only from inside out, but outside into the team. Who do we seek? Who do we exist to serve? And how do we add value, not only to our own little stratosphere, but to the solar system beyond it, into our stakeholders? So how do we provide service within the organization to the ultimate client, to the customer? What relationships do we have with our suppliers, our competitors? And asking the bigger question of what does the ultimate community expect from us, and what does the world expect from us?
And how would that differ? How would that differ from if you were approaching a similar challenge with your facilitation hat on? What would you be seeing differently about those two modes?
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's a couple of different areas where it is different. First of all, your primary purpose in the facilitator is to help the group or the multiple groups. Sometimes you're working multiple groups in facilitation, and guide them through a process towards an expected outcome, a delivery that they're trying to do. And in team coaching, it's you're trying to improve not only the process, but the team's capacity within that. So you're working with the team, not just towards the end result, but having them reflect on how they are getting that decision making through. That's as important as getting the decision. The process itself, if you're working in facilitation, your process is structured, and it's usually about a dedicated time-limited event. So you usually go in and you do, it might be 1 day, it might be 2 day. I've done 3 day, strategic events with people. And then it's usually finished. Sometimes you might get a call back to say, well, now we want to drill down in one of these. Sometimes you get a call back to say, now we want to work with how individual teams might want to implement this. But basically, it's a time-limited intervention. Team coaching is over a series and in a time zone. So you're working with the team, and you are, once you've done that initial sort of planning and preparing and deciding, you're accompanying them. The way I think about it is this. Imagine you're a basketball coach. You've got your team, you sit with them and you say, right, let's assess your strengths, let's assess your weaknesses. Where do people say, what's the best role you should play? Okay, you're the point guard, you're the this, you're going to do that. How are you going to play? What's your purpose this year? To win the championship or to move up a league? Getting clarity on that. What are your tactics? What's your best way of approaching? And then you say, see you at the end of the season. That's facilitation. I mean, it is. I've done it over and over. And if you're invited back next year, you say, how did you do? Now, as a coach, you're there every game. You're there working, reviewing the game. You're there saying, time out. What you're doing right now isn't working. We need to do something different. This person here, you missed 3 out of 5 of your layups. We need to work on your layup. This person here, you let the attack through 8 out of 10 of these. We need to work on your defense skills. So you're working with them and accompanying them throughout the journey. So you're working on building their skills so that they can actually implement the stuff that they agreed to do at the beginning of the year.
I'm curious as well about how much of what you coach them on is process versus are there any kind of guidelines around relationships as well? Because I'm guessing like the way that they relate to each other as a team is an interesting topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Because as I said, the team coaching is everything. And so you might be working, you're doing some scoping at the beginning. I mean, I can go through the process that we do, but that you're trying to find out where the team is right now. And it depends on where they are as to what you provide. If you're asking them, do you have a clear strategy, a clear goal? Do you all have individual goals? Do you have a charter around which you work? Do you have commitments about how you share information, about how you make decisions, how you handle conflict? If they don't have all of that stuff, then you have to start with that stuff, as well as saying, what are you expected to deliver? And so when you're working with them, you're determining how much you need to put in. And so the big thing about team coaching is that you are stopping the process to focus on the process. So when you do your timeout, you might be saying, timeout, hang on. And there's 2 ways you might do this. There's a continuum of it, but basically you're doing authoritative coaching or you're doing facilitative coaching. As an authoritative coach, you're saying, I am noticing right now, Mary's disengaged, Peter and David are having a heck of a bang bang and we're not moving anywhere. I'm seeing a few rolled eyes and a couple of shoulder shrugs. What's going on? And as an authoritative coach, you might say, this is what I suggest to get us out. I'd like to hear, let's do a whirlwind around the table. I'd like to hear a minute from everybody about where you think we should be doing next. So you're managing that process for them. As the more mature they are and as they develop, you might use a more facilitative coaching where I would say, time out, who's noticing what's going on right now? And you ask and you wait until they begin to see the eye rolls, the shoulder shrugs, the Mary's disengaged, the Peter and David are arguing, and it's not getting us anywhere. We're in a viral spiral here. And then I might say, what suggestions do you have for moving us forward? So I'm allowing the team then to decide how to handle it, because you have two responsibilities as a team coach. One is to help insert the feedback loops, both in terms of progress and results, and in terms of how we process, how we're doing it, what we just did there. So you're trying to give them this double sort of feedback loop. But the other responsibility you have, and I used to say this when I taught our delegates at the Red Cross, and they went into the field as capacity building delegates, no matter what the subject was, you're going out there to do yourself out of a job. Because when you come back, they need to be able to do it themselves. And so as a team coach, you're trying to hold the mirror up and have them see it so that they can do it themselves. So because if you take over the process, they're not learning. They're not learning and maturing as a team, so that they shouldn't need a team coach constantly. They should be moving on. It's not like in a sporting situation where you always have the team coach. But I think in this, you might go back and, every year and twinkle with stuff, but your goal is really to help the team mature so they can put in the learning loops themselves.
Yeah, that's amazing. So certainly part of this is like process literacy, self-awareness, being able to read the situational awareness, I guess is probably a good way to say it as well. We've spent a reasonable amount of time on the coaching part, but maybe it's worth thinking about like the team part as well, because when I put this topic out, like we always do a bit of research before we record these conversations. And I noticed that there was a bit of confusion around coaching, team coaching, group coaching. All of these words are used, I think, slightly differently by people. So what's important about the fact that we're calling this specifically team coaching?
Well, I think it has to go back, first of all, to contracting. Yeah. Everything as a facilitator, you contract at the beginning. So you contract, and I think we're jumping here a little bit about, what are the contexts, the success context for coaching. Your contracting is, why do they want the coach? What are they trying to achieve? Who is driving the relationship?
The word contracting I learned from you. So just in case anybody hasn't heard that term before, what do you mean when you say contracting?
Yeah, when you're contracting, it's the relation, it's the agreement you have with the sponsor, the client that you're going to be working with. And sometimes, and I found, these are all examples I found, sometimes the team lead is being told by her director, your team is not performing, you need to have a team coach, or you need to do this. And the person who, the actual team lead, isn't on board. They feel it's being imposed on them, and the team itself feels it's being imposed on them. Sometimes the team wants it and the team lead doesn't want it. And so to be successful, you've really got to, when you're first sort of scoping out and getting that contract, is to get an understanding that everybody wants this. Yeah. Because if they don't all want it, it's not going to work. Yeah. Because it requires time, effort, commitment, and a real commitment for change, because you're not doing business as usual. So in the contracting, you're saying, is everybody aware of this? Is everybody up for it? And does everybody understand what's going to happen? Now, also in the contracting, you're going to agree the kind of process. I mean, if it's a facilitator, you're saying, oh, it's a 3-day event, and we talk about that. In coaching, it's, okay, am I going to meet with you in your regular team meetings every week? Or is it every 2 weeks? Or is it every quarter? How is that relationship going to be? And then when I'm coaching, you're coaching the team. That's job one. But to do that, you're coaching the manager and you're coaching all individuals in the team. Mm-hmm. Now, that can be a huge challenge and potential conflict of interest. You can see that immediately, can't you? And so what the Global Institute of Team Coaching suggests is you always co-coach. Mm-hmm. So there's always two of you. And this serves to do a couple of things. One, it serves to keep you pure because your coach is watching you, how you interact with the team, and giving you feedback about, are you part of the solution or are you part of the problem here? Mm-hmm. Your relationship with the team can actually be a negative one. So they're keeping you honest. And then the other way that I've done it with a good colleague of mine in Australia is one of us might coach the leader, the other one coaches the team individually. And then together, we collectively, when we're all together, we might lead and coach the collective. But keeping that separate, because another part of team coaching is setting boundaries. Yeah. Most people, as you can imagine, are quite concerned when they go into this because it's a very revealing and potentially dangerous context. Yeah. And they want to know what's the confidentiality, what's the anonymity, how open can I be? Is what I say going to be released? So part of your contracting is also that. Yeah. Let's set boundaries.
So I think we can delve into that in a bit more detail. I'm assuming that also part of the contracting process is to check whether what you're dealing with is actually a team. So yeah. one of the things that happens to me a reasonable amount is kind of faced with not an entirely random group of people, but they don't necessarily have roles that clearly depend on each other and clearly understand themselves Absolutely. As a team. So I'm just wondering, in this contracting process, what you do to, what questions are you asking to check these types of things?
When is a team not a team? That's number one is when you don't, when do I not coach? Well, the first thing is if it's not a team. Mm-hmm. And so if there is no clear evidence that the people in front of you have interdependent goals towards a shared outcome, a shared purpose or a shared goal. If they are independent experts who can work in their own lane and then just deliver at the end, a bit like a Davis Cup team. Davis Cup 10, I told you, all my sporting analogies. A Davis Cup team, everybody plays individually and your cumulative results determine whether or not your country wins. Okay, we're all playing in our own lanes. I don't need to rely on somebody else. We rely on everybody for the cumulative results, but I can intervene with their play. Mm-hmm. Now, if I'm in a basketball team, you've got an independence there. Now, you've seen about the worst example of this in the planet is when, the dream team from the US went to the Olympics, 20 years ago or something, and the first time professionals were allowed to go. And of course, they blasted everybody off the planet and they all played very egotistically. There were 5 magic individuals on the court, including Magic Johnson, and they won the gold. Now, 4 years later, the rest of the world had risen up in competition, and they sent these 5 guys out again, professionals, and they didn't win. And there was hell on in the US. What the heck? How can we not win the gold in the basket? This is our game. Well, because these 5 guys went out and played as individual experts. And what they had to do was bring them back. They got a coach who was not a professional coach, but was a university coach, Professor K from Duke University. And his deal was, how do I make these people a team? I know they can play basketball, but how do I make them a family? How do I make them care about each other? How do I make them rely on each other, have each other's backs? And if you don't come to the training in summer, you might not get a place in the Olympics. And so, if you don't have that as a team, you can't team coach. So you've got to understand, how is this really a team, and are they committed to working as a team in an interdependent way so that collectively they can achieve much more than any of them individually could achieve.
I love the golf analogy. That's really nice. Golf versus basketball. Yeah, brilliant. So I do want to come back because I think this topic of how engagements start, what types of conversations you're having at the beginning is super interesting. because I wonder whether engagements always start as team coaching things, or if that's something that they become, because it feels to me like you actually need quite a lot of trust with the people that you're working with. And so I know you've got a lot of examples and a lot of different things, but like, are there some things that start as a particular type of engagement and then become something else?
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes you go in and already the coaching element is there. So that a team manager said to me earlier, at the end of last year, I want to work with my team and I want you to work with me because I want to improve my ability to help the team implement what it is we decide. And so, that's a kind of coaching. I didn't work with all the individual team members. I worked with them collectively, but I coached her in terms of how she was going to do that. And so that was an agreement. But honestly, one of the best coaching, or I suppose team coaching examples, and it never started that way at all, was when I was asked by a director we had 4 teams, an admin team. He had 3 teams that were expert teams, and he had 3 expert guys running them, and they were more concerned with their expertise and they were global experts in their areas, and so they weren't investing the time on managing the team. So he wanted to set up a matrix structure in the divisions, a division of about 50-60 people, and he had the 3 guys at the top as experts, subject matter experts, and then he pulled out 3 women. I mean, the gender thing isn't really an issue, but it is an issue. He didn't choose them, so he just thought that these 3 women laterally would run the teams, and that structure would be a better structure. Well, of course, you can imagine the resistance and that ego and the flapping of arms and how can possibly. But he asked me initially, would I design a management program for these 3 women so that they would improve their confidence in stepping up into the job? And that's what I did. We had a fabulous couple of days. Worked through stuff. I used a team psychometric instrument, team management systems. They loved it. They went back and said, oh, we should all, take a look at this because it's insightful. And the director said, oh, I think everybody should do it. The whole 60 of us should. So then it was an initiative for everybody in the department so that they could see the kind of approach we were working on. I continued to work with the women, and then they decided they had a strategy with 7 thematic goals, which people collectively had to contribute to. So would I facilitate their senior management team meetings to see how they would allocate resources across these 7 goals? And at first, the 3 guys were very resistant. They said, no, we don't want her running our meetings, but you can come, you can observe. So I went and observed, but during the process, they said, so how should we do this? And what suggestion do you have for analysis? So I started to coach them through their meetings, and I did several of them. And then the staff around the team started to say, well, we know we're being driven towards this team function and we're going to be performance managed against them. We want some skills building in how do you work as a team? How do you handle conflict? How do we communicate? So the whole thing kept evolving, and it went over 4 years. And sometimes it was right down to coaching when these women had to do performance management with their own teams and do their performance reviews. And so I would coach them through, how do you do a performance review? And then they'd go off and do it and come back and tell me how they did it. And sometimes we had a strategic review of these 7 goals. So then I was asked, will you come in and facilitate the whole department reviewing our strategic success against these goals? And then I would be back to working with the women, either as the 3 of them or one-on-one. And then eventually the guys, one of them, not the other 2, came to me and said, I want to know how to be a better leader in this position in the matrix so I can better work with people. Because even though I'm not the official manager, I do have to manage and lead people. And so I started to work with him. So it was very much an evolution towards, improving the results and global impact of this team. But it was never intended as a big project. It just kept accumulating, and I kept slipping in and doing. One day I was a facilitator, another day I was a coach, another day I was coaching the director, another day I was managing, doing management training. And that for me was help, staying with the team and accompanying them and doing what they needed me to do at any point in time.
So it's interesting that you say that you were moving between these roles, because you've also mentioned some of the kind of ethical dilemmas of the fact that you obviously, like, you have particular information and you have particular context, maybe more context about particular people than you do about others. Can you tell us a bit more about, like, is there anything you have to be careful of on a kind of ethical front, particularly if you're moving between these modes?
Yeah, definitely. I think you have to be very upfront right at the beginning and state the role that you're playing. Mm-hmm. And so when I was facilitating the senior management team, there were 8 of them, the SMT, I would clearly state at the beginning, I'm here either as an observer or I'm here in a facilitative way. If you need, if you want my observation about the process that they're using, and it was made clear to me then, yes, they didn't want any sort of advice. I wasn't a consultant in any way, shape or form, because these technical areas were not mine. They were public health, big global public health areas. And we made it very clear. So contracting almost every beginning. When I was managing the women, I had a much more involved mentoring, coaching relationship. And so they would ask for advice, how am I going to give me? And so it would go between coaching and advising. Why don't you try this method? Why don't you try that method? Where it got sticky was when they had people and they asked me for advice about, should this person be somebody we promote? They've been in a workshop with me, communication skills workshop. He wants to move into this particular job, which requires more communication. And what do you think? Do you think he's up to it? And that's a little bit outside of, my remit and my responsibilities. And so that requires a little bit of more diplomatic conversations. And it was with the director and with the other person, and really probing them about what do you, how are you seeing this? What are you seeing in Paul that you think he would do this? And basically confirming their choices or confirming their concerns. But that was a bit tricky when you start being asked to provide advice, because one of the things we haven't talked about is when not to coach.
Well, let's talk about that then.
Yeah. I mean, we said, first of all, if its team isn't a team, if there's no clear evidence that they have independency about the way they reach their goals. Now, sometimes that's a bit tricky, Lucy, because sometimes they're not aware of the potential for interdependence and how they could synergize efforts, And so part of it is, do you believe and does the manager believe that there is, and what you're trying to do is get them to identify it. But if they're clearly not, then no. If only the team lead wants the coaching, mm-hmm. If the team lead is weak and is expecting you to manage the team for them, they want to abdicate their responsibility. Oh, Pamela, you need to have this tough conversation with, and I really want to get rid of this person. She's driving me up the wall, and it would be good if you would help me move her out. Well, no, hang on, that's not my job here. Yeah. When the team expects you to rescue them mm-hmm. from the manager, ooh. We're hoping that you will be able to show how this person is not capable and is not the right person for the job. And so the team is against the team lead and they're expecting you to side with them. That's, a kind of a no-go area. The other one is if the team has no possibility of getting the resources it needs to do the job it wants to do. I mean, just this week I was asked by leadership and development team, they're wanting to do all sorts of stuff. And in this current crisis with the US pulling out of the UN and pulling out of the agencies, there's no hope that they're going to get the resources to do what it is they want to do. And so you have to be realistic about, can they do that? If you have close relationships with people on the team, you've worked with them before, and again this week, just yesterday, this same group wanted to try to do some internal stuff, internal team coaching. And I had to have this conversation around, do you have the kudos, the credibility, the gravitas and authority to be able to have these conversations with directors in your organization? Because it's easier sometimes for an outside person to have these tough conversations than you inside, And so that's another one. And then the other one, and I say this not lightly, but if the team problems are pathological, so I've been asked to work with a team, and as we do the initial scoping, the person says to me, but these two people can't be at the same table. They can't even be in the same room. And it's, hang on, time out. This is either a management issue and you need to manage this problem out or in or over, or it's a counseling, a therapy problem, and the person has serious problems and needs different kind of help than I can give, So you really are in a pathological system, which they're expecting you to come in and sprinkle pixie dust, and be magic and do something. And do not get involved in that.
It doesn't work. I really like the things that you were, saying. I guess common probably both to facilitation and team coaching is you have to have faith that, you have to believe that they're capable of the change that you want. And so if you don't believe that they can do that thing, then maybe that's a indication that you shouldn't be taking it on. I think one other thing that I was thinking about as a dilemma is particularly when you've got individuals who you're having more in-depth conversations with, there's always a risk that you end up with more information than the rest of the group has. And one of the principles that I think a lot of facilitators that I respect live by, and I'm pretty sure that you're one of them because I think I've seen your ground rules, is that you share all available information. And so if you're putting yourself in a situation where you have more information than the rest of the group, or somebody is expecting you to shuttle information somehow, like that for me is a massive no.
And that's part of when you do the contracting, and ultimately you want them to be open, transparent, and honest. But at the beginning, when there is lack of trust and there is an expectation of anonymity or confidentiality, you might agree in your contracting, okay, I'm having conversations with all of you, and I know what's happening with the manager. So yes, I have all this information. So we will agree that I will share with you the 3 key or 5 key themes that are coming through all of these conversations that are critical for the team. So I'm not going to get involved in he said, she said, and I'm fighting here. I'm saying this is the information I'm hearing that the team needs to hear if you are to move forward. And so we have the boundaries of anonymity, confidentiality in the sense of I didn't say he said or she said, but what I'm saying is that you as a team need to know this. Because if you don't, it's going to affect how you move forward. And so you've got that contracting. Now, as you move on, you may actually have them begin to own their comments. And that's what you want to do. And it's happened to me. I started with a director and a team, and it was the team wanted to get rid of the director. He was a new guy. He'd come in from the corporate world. He was in the humanitarian world, and the match just did not work. He was very, very finance, corporate, Arthur Anderson type. And they were like, whoa, what's going on? And so we started the meeting and they didn't want to speak. So I said, okay, write down your comments and put them on cards. Everybody same color cards so we can't distinguish. Give them to me and I will post them on the wall. And then collectively we'll review them and look at them. And then Paul can see what he wants to see. So we did that and I started to post, and I'd got a couple on, and one of the young women said, oh, hang on, I said that. That was me. This is my concern. And once she'd done that, the floodgates opened and most people were willing to own the comments. Now, what I then had to do, remember contracting, I had to time out. Paul, are you ready to hear all of this right now? Because it's become, we've got to stop it being personal, but I know it must be personal because you're having to hear and feel this. Do you want to continue in this vein? And he said, absolutely, because whatever decision I make at the end of this, I need to know what I'm dealing with. And so we moved on in that vein. He ultimately decided to leave. I hope it wasn't, but he just knew he wasn't, it was obvious he wasn't a match. But we had the contracting, they agreed to be transparent. I then had to say to him, are you willing to handle this? He said yes, so we moved ahead. So you constantly, a little bit like facilitation, but I think it's deeper when you're team coaching because you get to know much more detailed information about individuals, and you're not just talking substance at this level.
Yeah.
You're really getting down to a lot of stuff which can be very personal, very harmful, very painful for people to hear, and you have to be careful with that information.
That's an amazing example. I think, yeah, the types of impact that we can have when we're working with groups don't always look like happy endings, even if probably that was actually the happy ending of the group, right? Like, it's probably better for that person and the organisation as a whole. But those aren't really the things that you tend to put on your testimonials.
No.
Brilliant.
No.
So I think we've been talking for a while already, and I want to just quickly see if we can summarize a couple of key points. So we've talked a bit about the purpose. We haven't really talked that much about mindset. Like, would you say that there is any key mindset differences between when you're thinking of yourself as a team coach or a facilitator?
Yeah, I think as a facilitator, for me anyhow, I mean, and I'm quite results driven.
Yeah.
From where I am, I have a tough love approach, and the groups ask me to get to here, and my job is to help them get to there. Now, what that is up to them, but my job is to keep driving the conversation to get to there. And so facilitation, the mindset for me as the facilitator is to help the group get the result that they're looking for. I mean, they don't know necessarily what that is right now, but to get the result. And obviously you're concerned about the dynamics. You're trying to make it as an open space, as safe as possible, having psychological safety. But your concern is not for each and every individual. You can't be coaching each and every in the time frame you've got. Your responsibility is for the group as a whole and what they're trying to do. If your mindset for the team coach is, I want to help these people unleash all the capacity they individually and collect to the collective goal as possible, and I want to do it in a way that they learn and you build their capacity so that you're maintaining and sustaining their growth. So it's not an end to the event. You're looking at, how do I build capacity here so that that growth can continue, and so that you're building the internal mechanism so they can better handle the future challenges that are coming.
Yeah, lovely. And we also haven't really unpacked the skill set. I'm guessing that there is quite a lot of overlap, but maybe there's some differences as well between things that you care about in a skill set when you're facilitating or team coaching.
Yeah, I mean, there is, as I said, I'm a results-based facilitator. I am sort of helping the group get there. And I was criticized by my cohort constantly, well, by a couple of them who were, coaches, and then that was that I wasn't sufficiently coach-like. And I never really understood what she meant by that, because her coaching was very much just about the individual and allowing that individual to grow and to be whatever they needed to be, however they needed to be, wherever they needed to be. And it was all about building that. And that's great if you're doing one-on-one coaching with somebody, whether it's life coaching or professional coaching or whatever, you're looking at what is best for that individual. But if you're a team coach, you're looking at what is best for the collective. Mm-hmm. Now, you want to see, how do you help that person best contribute to that? But if their interests are in conflict with the team interests, for me, I have to be loyal to the team. Now, I might have a conversation with the person on the side and say, are you in the right place? Is this the right, in terms of your health and your well-being and your mental health, are you in the right place here? Do we need to talk about you and where you need to go? Because if she's not, if her needs and demands and expectations differ from the collective of the group, then as a team coach, I believe my responsibility is to the team. So that, that mindset is very different from this particular coach's mindset, where it was, no, it's all got to be about the individual. Well, it can't be all about the individual if you want a collective result.
Yeah.
Is
there anything else that you think I should have asked that I didn't ask?
Well, I think we covered, we covered most of the stuff. And I think sometimes it's this reflection. I think it really is helpful, for the co facility, because when you're doing this process, I think you're shifting quite a bit, as you've heard, in the roles. Now, I'm not sure every team coach views it the same as I do, but I see my role. You're facilitating, you're coaching, you might be mentoring, you might be giving, if you're doing authoritative coaching, you might be advising. These are the mechanisms I think would help to move forward. That's not facilitation, I mean, well, it can be, but it's much more direct. And it's saying, this is how I think you should move. But you have to be able to step in and know when to back off and allow the team to do it themselves, and be cautious too. You get much more involved when you're team coaching, but really, I think you have to be cautious. You are not part of the team. You might be with them through all the messy stuff and in their meetings, but you are not a member of the team. You can celebrate with them and you can commiserate, but the decisions they make and the choices they make, I think you have to be very careful into stepping over that line in suggesting whether it's their priorities. Well, I think you really should be focusing on this right now because, look, I mean, you might be saying, have you thought about the consequences of ignoring that?
Yeah.
That's a different question. But to say, I really do think you should be focusing here right now. And that's an area that you have to be careful not to step in. And I think you need to do a lot of self-reflection.
Yeah.
My colleague and I, Rhonda in Australia, would do a lot of reflection over a glass of wine in the bar afterwards, because it was one way to really, handle the feedback that we both needed, and that would help us go in the next day. But you have to be honest with each other about that as well.
Yeah, I can thoroughly recommend drinking a glass of wine with Pamela and unpacking all of these many years of experience. Pamela, this was wonderful. Where can people find you on the internet? Where shall I point people?
Well, PLB at plbconsulting.com is the website. That's also my email, plb at plb.com. I'm also always happy to hear from people. I'm on LinkedIn, so you can get me through them. I'm on Facebook. People can DM me on Facebook. So I'm available.
I will make sure all of these links in the box that you get, both on YouTube and Spotify. Pamela, thank you so much. I always learn so much when I'm talking to you. And yes, this will hopefully be the first of many conversations that we have.
Thank you. I'm so proud of you moving on and doing this. I mean, my colleague in Australia and I talked about doing this podcast but during COVID, 20, and we haven't moved. And then here you are. You've actually gone ahead and done it, and you're doing a super job. I've looked at some of your other ones, and I've been really impressed. So well done and continued success, Lucy.
Yeah, thank you, Pamela.